as what? Button, and I call it as what? Delete. Save this. And the moment we go back to our browser, we should be able to see the output.
Now what is our requirement? When we click on this, we want to call a function. So basically, remember, this is a template. And in this template, you write your HTML code, and user would like to trigger some events, and you want to respond to those events, right? You would like to respond to those events. How will you respond to the events? You will write that event logic here. You will write the event logic here. So here maybe you may say on delete, I'll just start with something called as what? Alert. User has clicked on delete. User has clicked on delete. And our requirement is on click of this button, we would like to call that function or method that we have created. Then what do we do here is we use something called as click. Any event that you would like to call it from here, this is the syntax. You use these brackets and then you specify event name, and then you assign what is the event, that means method that should be called. What is the method that we have created here? On delete.
Angular, is it case sensitive or is it not case sensitive?
I'll show you. Right? Question is Angular case sensitive? Right? Now you click on this, you can see. Now what I do is here I'll go and I make it as O. JavaScript, is it case sensitive or not?
It's case sensitive.
Case sensitive. So now you see here, the moment I give it as capital O, you get this error. Here also you will get that error. What does this mean?
So it is case sensitive.
Is that clear for everyone, guys? Many things I would like to show things practically, that's where, right? I was asking you questions and I was solving it. But on
We would like to send a request to the API, our Swagger API, not Swagger API, basically, sorry. So to our employee API, and we want to delete the data. But in order to delete the data, you have to pass what? What is the parameter we should pass, guys? If I click on this, they'll ask me to pass ID. But here, how do I get ID here? In order to call, like this method, we'll call, right? What is the response we are returning back from there? Okay.
delete. I may say alert. Employee is deleted successfully. But will it work? Do you think it will work?
No.
It will not work. What is the reason?
Have to pass the ID.
We have to pass the ID. Now from where this method is being called? On delete is being called from here. Now question is, when user clicks on delete, how do you pass ID? Obviously you need ID. How do you pass ID so that that ID can be sent to the API? That ID can be sent to the API. So you are triggering an event, and when you trigger the event, you would like to pass some data. You would like to pass some data. Now how do we access ID? You have the access, right? You know how to get ID, right? So what do? You say emp dot what ID, and that emp dot ID, you can create a parameter here, the data type. So now on delete, method receives a parameter with a name called as ID, and whose data type is number. Now that ID, who should pass it to what? API. So how do you get the ID? It's a string. So I concatenate the string just by adding ID. Save this. And then now if you go back, click on this. Now you see employee is deleted successfully, but it will have a problem now. It is deleted successfully, but can you see the data still? Can you see the data?
Yeah, we need to
There is no record. So if you click on delete, now you will not get any output because deletion is not successful. Why not successful? Because the data is not deleted. Why it is not deleted? Because there is no data with that ID. Resulting, it is not able to delete that. But if I click on this delete, I will get this. Now if you want to get this, you have to refresh. Then you will not get 101, 102. But it is a problem, right? You are showing user that employee is deleted successfully, but this data is not getting refreshed. How do we handle that? After the employee data is deleted, then you have to make another API request in order to get the remaining list of entries. You have two options, guys. You can delete that from here, from this array you can delete, or make an API call, get the fresh data. Make an API call, get the fresh data. Why you may have to get the fresh data? Why can't you delete it from here? The problem is, it's a web application. Web application will not be used only by you, right? There may be hundreds of users who will be accessing the application. When hundreds of users are accessing the application, some employees, maybe your colleagues, will add the data or some more data gets deleted. So it's always good to get what? Get the fresh data. Now how do you get the data? You have to make an API call. Which call? Get call. For that you have to repeat this code.
Can't we call the ng on init again?
Right. So just reload this. Now you see, delete, that goes off, delete, that goes off. Alright, now question is, can't you call ng on init? Are we calling ng on init? It will be called by Angular when the component is getting initialized. Do you want to initialize the component again? Answer is no. How do we handle this? Sometime back someone has asked me a doubt. Can't we create this in a function and call this function? Right, what is our answer? Now what are we going to do? We are going to do that. So whatever the code I duplicated, I'll take this out. This also will take it out. We'll create a function. Get employees. Let's call it as get employees. And within this, let's paste the code. And here, what do? This dot get employees, and the same code we will write it here as well. This dot get employees. Save this. Now everything should function as is. Is this clear, guys? Any confusion here? This is the way how we can implement what functionality? On delete, basically delete. So now let's go ahead and implement something called as what? Create. Let's go ahead and implement create. Now I am going to give little less importance to the UI, guys. That means styling part and all. That's what I mean, because that will unnecessarily take our time. New employee creation function. Employee ID, I'll say input type equals to text. Then here we may place a button, click is equals to create employee, create. Right now here, okay, so now let's go back here. Automatically you will get this. Now our requirement is user will fill his ID, name, location, salary, department ID, and he will click on create. When he clicks on create, you know that this method will be called. But this method has to send an API call. So if you observe your API, especially a post, you are going to post the data. You are going to post the data. For that, you need this data. Now, question is, from our template, how do we pass that employee object or employee data back to a method called as what method? What method, guys?
The post method.
Create employee method. I repeat my point. When user clicks on that create employee button, we are going to call this function. In this, you are going to write the logic to call your API. But to the API, you have to pass an employee object, right? And that employee object should have ID, name, location, salary, department ID. Now, how do we get those employee details here? So basically, this is what we call it as something called as data binding. When user enters the data, maybe in the HTML template, you may want to read that. And to that data, if you make any changes in the template, sorry, in the TypeScript file, you may want to update those changes to the template. You may want to update those changes to the template. So basically, this is something we achieve by using something called as binding, guys. Data binding, this is what we call it as data binding. Data binding automatically, remember, automatically keeps your template up to date based on the application state. Based on the application state. We use data binding to pass the data from component class to the component template, and in the component template, if I make any changes, we pass the data back to the component class. So the HTML and TypeScript file, TS file, or class file, these two are coupled together. So that the changes that you do in the HTML output, all right, our template can be accessed in the TypeScript file or component class. Changes that you do in the component class can be accessed in the template file. So basically, this is what we basically call it as something called as what, guys? Data binding. How do you bind the data? Earlier also, if you observe, on click of delete, we are calling the delete function from your TypeScript class. And to that, how are you passing the data? How are you passing the data, guys?
Parameter.
As a parameter, right? Or basically, that is basically we are passing it as a parameter when we are triggering an event. Remember, this is very important in Angular, not only in Angular, everywhere. As we are dealing with Angular provides 3 categories of data binding according to the direction of data flow. Angular provides 3 categories of data binding techniques, guys, according to the direction of flow. Now, what are the, like, you have basically something called as, I can take the same example. If you take this,
It's 12 o'clock.
this may be your view, and this is source. Source is nothing but your app component class, guys. Source is your app component class. So, how many directions are possible between view and source?
Both.
Ideally 3, guys. From source to view, one way. From view to source, one way. Or source to view, view to source. That is which way? 2 way. So I repeat, Angular provides 3 categories of data binding. So what are those categories? Source to view. Next is view to source. And the last is 2 way.
Sir, whether the source will have a baby of its own or
Source is this here. This is source. This class is what you call it as what, guys? Source. And this is what you call it as what? This is what, guys?
View.
View. Is that clear, sir?
yes, sir.
If I try to show it to you in the browser, this app.component.html, this is your view. This is your source. Now, in the earlier case, when an event is triggered on click of delete, from where we are passing data to where? Out of those 3, Now when I trigger this event, and I click on this, so from where to where we are passing the data? It's called ID is having a value of 105. So out of these three, which one was that?
View to source.
That was view to source. Now if you observe, I am displaying 106, Kiran, Bangalore, 12345, department ID 3. Now how View is getting this data? From where we are passing data to where?
Source to view.
That was source to view. So when it was source to view, when you want to display the data, what are we using? How are you using the, means how are you displaying the data?
Using
Double
get
curly brackets, emp.id. That approach is what you call it as what? I have explained in the last class. What do we call that as, guys? Interpolation. That is called as what? Interpolation. Basically, interpolation. Or you may be representing something called as a property. Right? These things you will understand. Or you may represent something called as what? Attribute or a class. Right? All this comes under the category of what? First one. No, source to view. One way from data source to view. Source to view. Whereas if it is an event, so what do you call that one? Or it comes under the category of what?
View to source.
View to source. So here, what is the syntax we may use? Interpolation is this. If it is property, class, or any of those things, then here you will have this a property name or whatever it is, and you may write some expression. Right? It can be property or attribute, anything. So this is how we write it. Now how event will be? I have shown you how event will be. Which brackets do you use?
Open close bracket.
Right? So event is equals to, maybe you may write your statement or you may call your event function. Then you have something called as two-way. How two-way is specified is this way. Alright. Maybe anything. Let's call this as target. If you see this or if you see this, that indicates data is passed from source to view. If you see this, what does this indicate? One way from view to source. If you see this approach, what does that mean? Two-way. You basically use square brackets, source to view, these flower brackets, view to source, and the combination is basically of what type? Two-way. That combination is what you call it as what, guys? Two-way. If I try to show you the same thing from Angular website so that you will understand a little more deeper. This is the website I always encourage you to visit, guys. Angular binding types, Angular binding types. Angular.io is the website, guys, that you always have to go through whenever you want to get something related to Angular. You see this, guys, using a property. What are the properties? Alt, src, right? These are properties. Like how do you use alt in square brackets? Src, if it is an image, src should be passed. So how do you pass src? A property at dynamic or run, right, at runtime. So you assign that value or you use that inside square brackets. So it becomes a property that has to be calculated at runtime. So such things you pass them inside square brackets. But from where this URL comes? From where that URL comes? That URL comes from source. So source value is used in the view, source to view, element property or component property or directive, all these things. So basically they come under property binding or property type, that is square brackets. If you see, that means what? You are getting the data from your source and you are using it in the view event. When it is an event, what do you do? It is passing the data from view to source. And then you have something called as what? Two-way. Square brackets and flower brackets. That is basically what, guys? ngModel is an example of which way binding? Two-way. Event and property. Event and property. Event is view to source. Property is source to view. Combination. And if you use an attribute or if you apply class, right, or if you do some styling, all these are again square bracket. Square bracket represents which way binding?
ViewToSource.
Huh? Just square brackets alone.
Sorry. SourceToView.
Source to view. Just remember these things, guys. You see this. Right? They specify. Now, what is our requirement? We want to create an employee object. So let's do that. So I'll create an empty employee object. I have created an object. So I'm just taking some exceptions, guys, but this is not the right way. Right way is always this. Declare the data type and then initialize the value. These things, right, I'll explain you when we get into something called as linting. Right? We have a concept called as linting. When we go there, I'll explain you these things. But right now, so I created an employee object. Now this object, initially it is empty, right? And any change user does on this ID should be assigned to something called as what? Employee object ID. So we use ngModel employee dot, what is the property to which you want to bind the data? ID. ngModel employee dot name. Location, salary, department ID. And when user clicks on that, Let me just do one thing. I don't do anything. I'll just say console dot log this dot employee. This dot employee. I'm just logging the employee object. That's it. Not more than that. Save this. Now if we go here, read this error. Read this error. What is it saying? Can anyone read that error loud?
Found down to ngModel since it isn't non-property.
It's not a known property of input. You are using ngModel, but question is, how does, right? From where this ngModel is coming is the question. ngModel is in a different module. You have to import that module. Import, basically it's in a module called as what? Forms module from and then you have to import a module called as which module? Forms module. So basically I am importing a module called as which module? Forms module. Save this. Now you see, no problem. Now one five name is, let's say, Kumar. Location is, let's say, Chennai. Salary and department ID 1. Click on this create. We are just doing console.log. See the log. How do you see the log? Inspect. Go here. You can see your employee object. Do we have the data now? You can see. Can you see the data, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you can see the data here. Now what should we do? We should pass this data to the API. But before to that, let me make some changes here. What should I do? I should not do such things here. All right. This dot employee dot ID is equals to 101. This dot employee dot name equals to, I'm just showing you what is a two-way binding. Say this. You see, in source, when I assign the data, you are able to use it in the view, and here I'll make some changes. And when I make changes, I can access this inside. Where, guys? Now click on this create. You can see you are able to access the data. So source to view and view to source. Whenever you have such scenario where from view to source, source to view, then you may think of using ngModel. We also have something called as form binding. when I explain you reactive forms in Angular, so I'll explain you that. Source to view, view to source, and based on your need, you use the respective one. Now here we have the entire employee object with the data. So what do we need? Now we want to post this data to the API. How do we do that? This dot http dot post URL. URL remains the same. And you should also pass what? Body. In the body, what am I going to pass? I'll pass our which object? Employee object. Dot subscribe. What are we going to return from here? It's a normal one. Employee created successfully. Now, after the employee creation is successful, we should display the data, right? So how do we do that? We say this dot get employees. And most important thing is, I don't want to keep the employee object as is. Instead, what am I going to do? I am going to initialize that object again. I'm going to initialize that object again. So save this. Let the reload happen. 10115 Rajim, Bangalore, salary is let's say 45454, department ID is 2, click on create. Something is wrong. Here is the problem. Server responded with 400. 400 is a bad request. This is how you have to check these database. Now you see you have errors here. Read this. Can you read and tell me what is the problem there?
The data is not converted to JSON.
No, it's a JSON data. What you are seeing object is a JSON object. The problem is, this is the problem. Basically, the problem is not from your end. The problem is in the API. So the problem is, now you have employee. Now, not sure. I remove that. Yes, I would have removed. Earlier, not sure how many of you have observed. When I was displaying the data, when I was doing console log, do anyone has remembered how was ID was shown? Is it shown as a number or was it shown as a string?
Number.
Was it displaying ID inside? I can just show you again. We'll take you back to sources. Click on this. See this. This is where the problem is. Keep the cursor on the employee. Look at the data. Department ID. How is it showing the data?
Showing as a string.
It is showing as a string. ID, it is showing as a string. Salary, it is showing as a string.
Yes.
Now, if I go here, just to show you, ideally, you should not do this. This is not your problem basically. This is the way how system is treating your data. So we can solve this in multiple ways. I'll show you. Now if I just pass this data, you see, it will come here. Now you can see we have the data. Earlier the problem was it was a string and it was not able to convert that string to respective data types. It was not able to convert the string to respective data type. When you get such problems, usually we don't handle that problem in the Angular code level. We will tell. So there is a mismatch. What is the mismatch? Database. I would have deleted. Just a second, let me open this database. This I have written it long back, guys, right? So after that I would have changed the table schema or anything. So ideally, whenever you get this kind of error, you update your API team. So basically what API team will do is they will use some converters, and ensure that the value that they have received is convertible. So see the problem here. Total how many columns are there here? 6 columns are there, but in my query we are passing only how many? 5. That is the problem, right? I can just easily handle that, maybe just pass this. Ideally, as I said, I am not interested to make much changes to my backend API because I don't want to confuse you too much here. Our intention is always on the front end. You see, employee is created successfully. Now you get the data. And if you refresh here, this data will be there in the database also. The new record. Because the email ID passed empty. That's the reason. So here what I would like to show you is, we have seen how do you pass data using event binding. How do you pass the data using what binding? Model binding. And how do we also pass the data using something called as what? Interpolation. Is this clear, guys?
Yes.
Now your assignment is to implement update, guys. So I'll keep a button here. Obviously you should keep a button here. Button, click on edit. So instead of delete, it has to be edit. And when we click on that, that data has to be displayed in this. That data has to be displayed in this. And when we click on update, ideally this should not be update, just you may change it to save or whatever you want. And when we click on save, what has to happen? You should update that data. Is the assignment clear, guys?
You should update that data. I have shown you how to do read, create, delete, and update is your assignment. Alright, so with that we stop here for the day, and I want all of you to complete this today or tomorrow before the class, right? And if you have any doubts in this, I'll update, means I'll answer, and I'll upload along with the recording. I'll also upload the API code, right? So that entire project itself I'll upload. You just need to run, but for that you need to install Visual Studio. So just install Visual Studio 2022 community one, or as I said, in the web you will get different API endpoints. You can use any one endpoint to perform your operations. I hope I am clear, and I assume you will spend some time and do this. Alright? Without practice, you will find things little difficult, guys. Please practice. Alright? I'll upload things, and to you, like whoever has provided email IDs, I'll give you the access.
Shrikant, can you just show me one time save?